This is a presentation on the ancient classical empires of the Mediterranean. We're going to look at both Rome and Greece. Characteristics that make a civilization great. The primary component that makes a civilization great is complexity. Factors that affect complexity can include population pressure, climate change, and even their examples of greed for power and for wealth. Experts and archaeologists agree that complexity developed gradually over time, that there was no one single factor that caused for societies that changed from simple communities to more complex civilization. Sedentism also played a role in requiring people to settle down once skills and technology in agriculture and pastoralism increased. The rise of urbanism and the need for religious and political centers also motivated uh, uh, communities to settle down and establish and become more complex, establishing civilizations. Architecture that became useful centers for the community, like churches, plazas, and monuments. All of those cultural centers were enticing to a group of people so that they could meet, they could socialize, and enjoy the fruits of those communal relationships. There were increases in technology by the practice of metallurgy. This is another characteristic which helped in military development. The use of calendars and astronomical observations also helped with understanding the seasons and understanding nature, which was important for agriculture, as well as the construction of roads, which was necessary as a transportation network for the purposes of trade. Finally, another characteristic is social stratification and rankings. Basically, a hierarchical structure was a feature observed in the great civilizations with classes and differing levels of power. The geography and climate, both Greece and Rome, they were both peninsulas. They both had plenty of mountains. They were surrounded by sea on all three sides. They both had a Mediterranean climate, but the differences were in the soil. Rome had a fertile soil on the Italian peninsula, while the Greeks had poor soil on the Peloponnesus peninsula. They had a Mediterranean climate, which meant dry summers, and the winters were more wet and rainy. The Mediterranean Sea kept the land from becoming too hot or too cold, and the mountains blocked the cold polar air from the north. Agriculture in Rome. Rome began as a farming community and developed into a major that farming community developed into a major economic activity. Ancient Rome adopted farming techniques found in Greece and North Africa and improved on these methods as they spread Roman settlements all throughout the region. Farming estates developed with some becoming huge grazing ranches where overgrazing by sheep and other livestock actually caused soil erosion that is still seen to this day. The main crops in the Roman Empire were grains, grapes, olives, and figs. Other important crops included apples, peaches, pears, plums, various herbs, almonds, and cherries. This is a picture of uh, the Roman farm with a horse working and guys using a plow and harvesting what looks like some grains. Agriculture in Greece was a little different, but somewhat similar. The state did not control farming, and crops were grown and livestock reared by private individuals on their own land. So the success of the Greek city states was based on their ability to produce surplus in agriculture, which allowed other citizens to pursue other trades that allowed for exchange of necessities between the communities for things that they lacked. Cereals, olives, and wine were the three most produced crops suited as they are to the Mediterranean climate. There is evidence of crop rotation in fields were left fallow and allowed for soil nutrients to regenerate and moisture to build up in the soil over time. So they didn't have the same issues kind of that Rome had. This is an image of satyrs making wine in ancient Greece. This is an image of Alexander the Great. That we're going to talk about the military conquests. Both Rome and Greece are noted for their endeavors in world conquest, but why were they successful? The Greek conquest and spread across the Middle East and into Asia established hundreds of Greek settlements across Persia, Asia Minor, Africa, and India, changing the face of Europe and Asia forever. The Roman conquest ventured into the Middle East, Northern Africa, and further west into Europe, while establishing roads and trade routes with the communities that it conquered. Both empires allowed its subjugated populations to keep many aspects of their culture and religions, but were exploited for their goods, and they were also heavily taxed. The Romans and Greeks both learned from the people that they conquered and assimilated or used their technologies to better their culture. The religions of both ancient societies are polytheistic religions. Both cultures have almost the same gods with the same powers. They also have seemed to have evolved or developed from some kind of pantheon from the ancient Indo-Europeans, such as their Diospatir becoming Zeus for the Greeks and Jupiter for the Romans. But there are differences. There's a record of Roman senators scoffing at the Greek representation of the gods, in which the old Roman notion that the gods are not supposed to be as beautiful as Greek art represented them to be. There are also some Roman gods where there is no Greek equivalent. For example, Sylvanus is a woodland god who may have been a spin-off or later incarnation of Mars once Mars became a god exclusively identified with the Greek Ares. A common practice among the ancients was the concept that if a Greek or Roman god represented the same ideal or concept, there was no dissonance between the two cultures who worshiped the sun by a different name. And there's an example of an emperor who became sick, and it was no issue for him to pray before a Greek statue of the god of healing. The Roman gods wouldn't be offended because it was basically the same, concept, the same idea. Roman culture, life revolved around the city of Rome. There was a city of the seven hills. The city was bustling with many theaters, gymnasiums, taverns, baths, temples, and brothels. There are separation of classes that could be seen through residential architecture, and it ranged from modest houses to country villas in the capital city to the elegant residence on the Palatine Hill, where the word palace is actually derived. Much of the Roman cuisine was essentially Greek, with influence of Greek household slaves that taught and educated the privileged Roman youth. Greek culture, the transformational turning point came in the 5th century after Alexander the Great united Greece from a country of warring city-states or polises to a united empire. Politics played a dominant role in society and would later influence the Roman Republic prior to the ascension of Caesar. Democracy thrived in Athens, but was controversial in many of the other city-states in the empire. The Greeks were also very fashionable, as demonstrated through their trademark red and black pottery, which was bought and sold over the Mediterranean as far as Asia. The people were known for big festivals, grand temples, the invention of theaters, dancing, marble statues, and extravagant jewelry. Greek and Roman ideas. The most notable Greek concept is the idea of democracy, which is a method of governmental rule by representation elected by the people. The Greeks were also notable for their philosophies and philosophers and produced great minds like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, among many more. The ideas of Stoicism and skepticism were rooted in ancient Greek thought. Romans also had great philosophers and thinkers like Plutarch, Seneca the Younger, and Pliny the Elder. Plutarch famously stated, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled." which I love that. And another great quote was, "What we achieve inwardly will change outer reality." And the first picture to the left is that of Pluto, and the second is that of Plutarch. Fun fact: Plutarch was actually a Greek who became a Roman citizen, but desired that his writings would be exchanged among both cultures. Ancient thought and modern thought, many of the ideals, ethics, philosophies, systems of governance, and culture prevalent in the Western developed nations stem from the ancient Greeks and Romans. The guiding principles of honor, conquest, art, social engagements are still seen in almost the same way in today's society. Romans had the Colosseum, and in the 21st century, we have the UFC and American football as forms of barbaric modern battle. The Greeks contributed to the Olympic Games that are still held as the largest international sporting event in modern times. Ancient Greece and Rome had theaters and plays for entertainment, and we pack movie theaters every time a new blockbuster is released. War and conquest have changed because of international treaties and advanced weapons, but the motivations remain similar, while wars still occur for the purposes of expansion, land disputes, or bad actors. Our government systems resemble the Greek and early Roman republics by having representation by the people, and also being a republic comprised of many states that are combined into one nation. And examples of this include the United States, Canada, and the European Union. In conclusion, I found although these cultures are ancient and were not as developed as modern nations, we find that they were comprised of people who have the same virtues and vices that plague and promote modern civilizations. People that, like the people of today, have the same interests, motivations, and desires. The desire to be a part of a community, to be loved, to gain honor and glory through hard work and achievement. These things transcend time and are central to the human condition. Ancient Romans and Greeks contributed many great systems and ideas to modern civilization, and upon analysis, are not far removed from their modern counterparts. Thank you. And here are references, okay, for the presentation. Thank you.